Okay, good morning everyone, and thanks Ürün for the introduction. So welcome to your English practice from my side. It's almost 10 a.m. now, and I assume that at a normal day most of you would be sitting in a meeting right now. At least for myself, that would probably be the case. Right, so luckily we are not in a meeting, we are in this great room all together to talk about some really exciting topics. But I still want to start with meetings, and specifically with this small sketch that I have lived through quite often when I was sitting in meetings about AI strategy, AI products, and so on, right? So you have different stakeholders who come together at the table. You have the engineers, then you have the UX designers, you have the PM, and probably also some business stakeholders. And then one of them raises a statement like, okay, this weekend I wrote a great poem about my dog with AI, so let's just use this model now and transform everything we do in our business, right? And if you're in a meeting like that, and I think that most of you would also have that reaction, then you think, okay, there are really a lot of things that we need to fix there, right? So there's like misunderstanding about AI, about how it works, about what it can do for your business, and then there's also misalignment, because the other guys in that room, they will also have their own thinking about AI, and normally it doesn't correspond to the thinking of the other people. So that's kind of the sketch, right? The sad reality is that according to statistics from 24-25, 80% of all corporate AI initiatives in companies fail, so they never make it into sustainable production. Right? They might make it into production for a short time, but then it will quickly be shelved because there are too many mistakes, the system is not reliable enough, users are not trusting it, and it's generally also bad for the reputation of the company. So I did my PhD in AI in 2015, and since then I have been consulting companies on AI development and also building AI products myself. So that's why I decided at some point that, okay, to kind of avoid or at least mitigate this kind of meeting situations and in general those misalignments, I need to write a book. A book which kind of lays out all that practical experience that I had collected during these years, but then that's also based on the theoretical basics of the domain, because we have a lot of time, a lot of buzz at the moment, but there are really, the kind of foundational stuff and the basics, they really often get lost, and that's a huge issue because then it gets to all kinds of misconceptions and misunderstandings. That's the book, The Art of AI Product Development. It's now available with my publication, so you can get a discount code. So what it covers and what it presents is basically a structured methodology for AI discovery, development, and then also integration. So what happens once you put your AI feature or app into production, right? Here you can see the different topics that are covered. You can check out the book. There are some free samples also, so just feel free to check it out. That was the sales part for today, and in the talk I would like to focus on three frameworks that are used in the book and that are kind of also that also reflect those issues and those challenges that we see in companies at the moment, right? So there are many more different frameworks that are presented in the book, but I would just like to pick out these three to kind of give you a glimpse into this methodology. So the first one is about value creation with AI. How can we identify the best opportunities for AI at this stage in our company? Then how can we gradually build a competitive mode with AI, right? Because we know that, okay, the models are a commodity, so we as a company, how can we actually differentiate here? And then the third one, and I think that's a very exciting one, is about managing trust and uncertainty. We will also go into some UX aspects here, right? Basically how to manage all those, mistakes, all the probabilistic nature of AI. So let's dive in with value creation. Maybe you can do some introspection. We will not do hand raisers now, right? But just think, okay, why are you here? Why are you doing AI, or why do you want to do AI? Here are some of the most common reasons that I have encountered among companies, right? So everybody else does it, so there is competitive pressure. Then we are very good at it, right? So maybe we have a team of PhDs somewhere in the background that can really provide us with some unique AI stuff. Our leadership or our investors are hot on AI, so they put all this pressure on us, right? That's a very frustrating reason for many. Then the technology is great and we're excited about it. We might not understand it fully, but we're still excited, and that's also valid. 5, AI is a perfect fit for a user in need X, Y, Z. And then finally, we want to use AI to build a long-term strategic and competitive advantage. So, according to the PM textbooks, here probably 5 would be the right reason. Right? So we have a complete user need, and then AI seems to be the perfect solution for it. 6 would be probably not according to the PM textbooks, because that's a very subtle question about long-term strategic advantage, right? But it's also a very valid reason to do AI. But then the other ones, right, and especially the third one, so this pressure from leadership and investors when they come and they tell you, okay, just do some AI, right, find some opportunities. So what we see is that those companies who start out with AI based on these motivations, they can actually also be very successful, right? Because virtually in any business or in any product, there is something that you can improve, automate, or optimize with AI, right? The question is just how can you really pinpoint those specific opportunities. And our approach there is that we don't follow this classical opportunity solution tree, right, as you probably know it from PM, but instead what we have done is that we have built an AI opportunity tree which is based on the intrinsic benefits that AI can provide, right? So we have 4 of these 4 benefits here. The first one is automation and productivity, right here, right? So this AI, you can automate some existing tasks, you can save time, save cost, and so on. Then the second one is about improvement and augmentation. So for example, if you're using AI to assist you in content creation, you're not letting it do the whole job, or at least I hope so, that you're not. But you're kind of interacting with it, the AI provides you some inspiration, then you kind of look back, you can edit the content and so on. Then there is innovation, so when you really use AI to transform the way you do business. And finally, we have personalization, so when you kind of use AI to customize your product, its output, its recommendations, and so on, to really an audience of one user or maybe a small group of users. So let me just show you how we use this opportunity tree in practice. Using a project that we are currently doing with Lufthansa, so the German airline, and our task or our challenge there is basically to support their innovation processes in the company, right? So whatever innovation to do at the airport, in the cabin, in their food and service offering, and so on. Basically, our task is to provide them with insights about this innovation and then to the specific recommendations on how they can optimize it. So this is a bunch of the kind of opportunities that we identified when we started out with the project, right? You can imagine that this is just a whiteboard and then you're sticking your opportunities out there. So we have some low-hanging fruits, like the classic ones, right? It's about competitor monitoring, customer feedback analysis, and so on. And then we have some more, let's say, innovative stuff about AI-driven prototyping, recommendations for innovation, and so on. So what we then do next is we will just classify those opportunities into this AI opportunity tree, and that already gives them a first structure and a structured way to think about that space. And then the next thing here, so that's actually really something that also arises from practice, is that we have seen that in this opportunity tree, you can also use it as a hint for your prioritization. Because normally what happens is that you want to start with the left side, right? So this goes automation and productivity. use cases and benefits, and then you will move to the right, because on the right you will find those more advanced, more nuanced, and also more complex use cases. Whereas on the left, so we always advise companies to start with automation and productivity, right? There are two reasons for that. The first one is that, okay, for most use cases, it's actually much easier technically, right? Because normally these are very short processes that are performed frequently, like customer feedback analysis, right? And that are quite easy to automate. And then the second thing is also that on the left, it's easier to quantify the value of your opportunity, right? So you can just quantify it in terms of your time or cost savings, and then whenever you need to communicate with stakeholders to really present the value of the opportunity, you really have this very easy and quantifiable way of doing it, right? So that's exactly how we did it also with Lufthansa. Let me show you. So in the first phase, we started with automation and productivity, then we added some improvement features and benefits, then we kind of already went into innovation and personalization, and then finally, so that's the outlook, that's the next stage that we're now in, is basically about AI-driven prototyping and the validation of individual innovation ideas with customers, and that's already, so these are already very, let's say, new use cases for them, but now they already have this basis to build on, they have the trust in the AI, so we are quite confident in also approaching these more complex use cases. Good. So that was the value creation part and the AI opportunity key. Now the next part is about building a competitive mode, right? So now you have started out with AI, you have a couple of use cases in production, but then you see your competitors are catching up, right? So how can you make sure that you build out and sustain your competitive mode over time? And here I would like to quickly go with you through this AI system blueprint that we are using we have been using for any kind of AI system so far, just to map it out, and then also to give the customers and the developers basically a tool to communicate about it inside the team and also with other stakeholders. It's a very simple blueprint, so basically you have on the left the data, as you know that's the fuel or the raw material for any AI system. Then the data will go into the intelligence component. The intelligence, you can think of it, start thinking of it as the models, right? So the LLMs or maybe the predictive models that are using. But then today, most AI systems, they are actually compound systems, right? So there is not just one model running inside them. Instead, you maybe have a RAG setup or you have an agent setup. So there are different models, databases, tools, and so on interacting with each other. So that's why you don't call it model, but call it the intelligence component. Then there is the user experience. So whatever insight, value comes out of this intelligence component, the user experience is basically your channel to transport it to the user. And then finally we have the value provided by the system and then the opportunity that it addresses. So in purple, you have the solution space, in classical PM thinking, right? And then in green, you have the opportunity space. Now let's look at the topic of competitive mode, and I would like to walk through an exercise that I've been doing a couple of times with startups when advising VCs basically on their startup investment. And of course, the question about the competitive mode, especially in AI, is a very important one. Because if you see that the competitive advantage is blurry or maybe naive, then of course that's a big red flag for a VC. So, first point is, okay, the company comes or presents the product and we have a unique proprietary data set, right? So maybe they have some background in medical science or in legal and so on, and they have some historical data that they have collected over time. The problem is here that, okay, normally your AI in the end, it will display, not the data itself, but it will display the signals from the data, right? So it's, in most cases, it's possible to reverse engineer these initial signals that you had in the data. And then, of course, you know, the competitive mode is also very thin or even none. Then in the intelligence component, some companies will come and say, okay, we have the most performant models, that's naive, right? Normally, you're not OpenAI, you're not Google, you're not Anthropic, right? So what makes you think so that you could build the most performant models? You don't have the expertise normally, and you also don't have the infrastructure and the data. Third point, of course, the UX. We have the best UX competence. Again, a little bit naive, because that's a very subjective thing, right? What makes you think so? And then the opportunity, okay? We have identified a super-duper unique opportunity on the market. Here, not just in AI, in every other product also, you cannot keep it for a secret for too long, right? So after some time, the competitors will come. So in my experience, the startups that can build the best competitive mode and also the companies, right? So here I'm talking about companies that are not AI first, right? So they don't have some, let's say, unique PhD level AI expertise that they're building on, but they have good product teams, right? And they have engineers that can acquire those AI engineering skills quite fast. So in my experience, they can build a competitive mode by combining three components. Basically, on the one hand, you can use and reuse existing AI assets, so that's the models, the frameworks, the data sets that are already out there. Right? So great basis to build upon if you don't want to learn from scratch. Then the second component is about your own AI engineering skills, right? And that's something that today can be acquired quite quickly. If you have skillful engineers, right, then it's normally quite easy for them to transition from their, backend development or full stack development into an AI enhanced engineering role, right? So that can be about prompt engineering, probably the simplest kind, up to RAG systems, agent systems, fine-tuning LLMs, and so on. And then the third one, and that's, I think that's kind of the secret ingredient here, is really about the unique domain expertise that you bring to the table, right? So if you have domain expertise, let's say you're building a product for medical or for legal, right, then we need to make sure that you have access to these domain experts. It can also be a horizontal use case, right? So for example, in this case that I showed you with Lufthansa, we are focused on the innovation process, which is more of horizontal, right? So whatever domain we can pour the product into, it still has this unique expertise about innovation, about how an innovation process is structured and how you can bring AI into this equation, right? So that's kind of, if you can combine these three things, then that's a good way to build up your competitive mode over time. And it's not easy, right? So by themselves, the three components, they're quite straightforward, right? But if you want to let them dance together and work together, then it becomes really much more difficult because you have a lot of alignment issues. Like, the first two existing AI components, so what do we do? What do we reuse, which is already existing, versus what do we want to build ourselves, right? Or between the domain experts and your AI engineers, how do you make sure that all the knowledge from the domain engineers is really injected and integrated and encoded in your AI system? So there are a lot of these alignment issues that need to be figured out over time. And now coming back to the domain expertise topic, so there are a lot of methods to inject domain expertise into your AI system. Here, I have just structured it according to these three components of the solution space, right? So the data, the intelligence, and then the user experience. And you can kind of pick and choose them, right? So whatever makes sense and provides the highest leverage for your product at the moment, you can just pick one or multiple of these methods. You don't need to apply them all at once, right? And another thing is that start from, so your domain experts, especially if they're not really from the software domain, right, they will likely not have a very high AI affinity. So start from the methods that are a bit simpler, like maybe doing some data annotation or maybe writing the context for the prompts and so on, right? So get them into this, get them used to the idea of AI, and then you will see that they will have a natural learning curve, and you can add more complex stuff on top, right? Always reinforcing this competitive advantage. Good. And now coming to the third part. So managing trust and uncertainty. That's a quote from one of the books that I'm living by. So it's called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. And the quote is, nothing is as fast as the speed of trust, right? So you probably know it from human relationships and business relationships. If there is trust, then everything is much smoother and much faster. It's the same for digital products, right? So when you have a product that has a big brand behind it and a lot of positive word of mouth and customer feedback, then of course it's much easier to build trust into the product, to buy it, and to start using it. Now, with AI, we run into some additional trust challenges. So building and calibrating trust really becomes one of the most important tasks in AI integration and adoption. Right? So with AI, we are moving from this very deterministic paradigm that we normally have in software development, where everything is hard-coded by humans and we kind of trust the humans, even if it's not always the right thing to do. It moves into a probabilistic space where the outputs are uncertain, and that would be okay, right? I mean, we can live with some degree of uncertainty, but the problem is that the AI makes mistakes, right? And especially so for us, we are mostly working in a B2B context, and then mistakes can be a total trust killer for the people because they will make decisions based on the insights from the AI, and if the decisions are wrong and they kind of cascade into negative consequences for the company, then trust is just gone and it's very difficult to restore. So we use a construct to structure or to kind of think about trust. That's called the trust scale, right? So here you can see it has two extremes. On the one hand, you have no trust, so it's also called algorithm aversion, right? So you have just some people who are very resistant to AI. Often there are some hidden fears behind it, they fear their job will be automated and so on. So all those classical things that we know, right? And in that case, adoption or just, the purchase of the product just doesn't happen, right? So that's something that needs to be solved by building trust. And then on the other extreme, we have over-trust. So basically you have users who are using the product and you're trusting it blindly. So whatever the system spits out, right, it's kind of, in German we always call that, the AI has spoken, right? So the AI has spoken and we now just accept it. Right? And of course that's also a quite harmful attitude because whenever the system makes a mistake, you don't verify it, you don't have awareness that it's likely to make a mistake, then you will basically just accept it and likely it will cascade into some negative consequences. So your task as a PM, as a UX designer, also as an engineer, all these roles need to work together, is basically to pull your users into this golden middle of calibrated trust, right? So here they see the value of the product, so they use it, but then on the other hand, they're also aware that it will make mistakes, that it will not always provide full transparency, so they will use it responsibly and calibrate their trust accordingly. And I would like to talk about two aspects about building and calibrating trust. So the first one is about providing transparency into this, general AI black box that we normally face, right? So providing transparency, you normally do it by explaining the AI system. Now, of course, as you all know, the huge models like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Co, they're very difficult to explain. They have too many parameters, and even if you have a mini predictive model, right? So say sentiment analysis, then still it will have thousands or hundreds of thousands of parameters, which is really small, but it's still not really explainable in human terms. There is just too much math going on. So what we do in that case is that we will provide a partial explanation of the system, right? So we will explain those most significant parts of this black box that also will allow the users to calibrate their trust. And these are the capabilities and the limitations of the systems. with a focus on the limitations, right? Because capabilities, normally we have this overblown marketing culture at the moment, right? So we don't really have any issues communicating about the capabilities, but we are much more careful and reserved about the limitations, about saying honestly what the system can do, and so on. But that's really important if you want to build long-term trust with your users. Then the second point, the data sources. So that's really a low-hanging fruit for most companies, right? There are some model providers that don't provide the transparency into the data sources, but whenever you're able to provide that insight, right? So for example, for Lufthansa, we will use a lot of domain press, of the trade press about the airline industry, and then we will just list the websites and all those data sources that we are using, right? So whenever you are able to provide the transparency or to say how the data was actually created, that grounds the users in the reality, right? So it doesn't explain the whole path from the raw data to the final output, but just, by grounding them in that input, it really helps them to also understand and empathize with the system. Then the third one, how the models work. Of course, this one is very tricky, right? So for ChatGPT, you would say, okay, the model is generating the next word from the distribution of words that it has learned from a large quantity of data, and so on, right? So you can make it very technical, but for most users, that's not so approachable and also not so helpful. So in that case, just try to use metaphors, analogies, maybe examples also, right? So example-based explanations are also a great thing to really give users that kind of intuition about how the model works. And finally, how to act on the outputs. That's not exactly part of the black box, right? You're just saying, so for example, in Lufthansa's case, you would say, okay, the model comes up with this innovation recommendation, so you can now go to the team workshop, you can take that and that information as a basis for the brainstorming during the workshop, and then you can refine and shape that innovation idea together with the team. Right? By just giving this kind of actionable advice to the user, you can really kind of offload all the other explanation topics and issues that you might have in explaining the system as a whole, right? Because that also kind of provides them a sense about the actual usefulness and the value of the system, right? And once you can demonstrate that clearly, a lot of the other questions, they kind of go into the background. These are the four components, and you can see that we have a big black bar at the bottom, and it stays there. As said, you cannot explain the AI system fully, but in most cases that's fully fine, and users will just live with it, right? Nobody wants to hear super complex mathematical explanations about the system. Right, so provide really clear, intuitive, and useful partial explanations, and then users will be able to live with this black box component. Okay, so that was one topic about trust. Yes, let me show you just quickly how that can look in the UX, right? So here you have on the left an example from a predictive AI application, right? So just data analytics, and then you can explain, okay, how were the scores formed, how were the scores calculated. And then on the right, you can see a screenshot from V0. It's one of my favorite apps at the moment. And you can see, so that's a practice that many models now have, including OSP by OpenAI, including DeepSeek and so on. So they will just publish their chain of thought, so how the reasoning went basically from the user prompt to the final answer of the model, right? And then the other thing also about the limitations is to work with confidence scores, just to show, okay, the model or the system might not be as confident for certain predictions. So here you can see this example, two cute little animals. You're doing image recognition or image classification on them. For the left one, you predict with a very high confidence that it's a cat, right? So just priming the user to accept the output. And then for the right one, we as humans see it's a dog, right? But the AI said that, okay, I think it's a flat ball, but my confidence is only 63%, right? So when you show this confidence, it will already kind of, prompt the user to dig deeper and to verify the result, right? So that's the kind of trust calibration you can do here. Okay, and then the last topic for trust is about errors, right? So what many teams do at the beginning, and that's why I really want to emphasize it, because that's super important from the beginning, from your discovery, right? When you're discovering and prioritizing your AI opportunities. Basically that they, to quantify the value of the opportunity, they will take the cost of the status quo, right? So let's say you have a manual process of monitoring your competitors over time, or of analyzing your customer. Right? They will count the cost in this manual process, and then for the AI opportunity, they will count the development cost, right? So what will it cost the team to develop it, and then also the operating cost, so maintenance cost, the model cost, the infrastructure cost, and so on. And if the left side is significantly smaller or lower than the right side, then they will go for it. That doesn't count in the cost of the mistakes that the system will make, right? And normally the system will make different kinds of mistakes. It might hallucinate, it might make some predictive mistakes, and so on, right? It might even get some unfair bias into its output. So you need to count that cost in from the beginning, right? And these are two parameters. The first one, how much will it cost the human? So how much time will it take to find and identify and fix those mistakes? And then the second one is basically if the human doesn't catch the mistake, what will happen, right? If it's a better recommendation on YouTube or Netflix, it doesn't really matter, except for some frustration building up. But if you're doing fraud detection, or if you're analyzing medical images, then you can imagine that mistakes are much more expensive, so you need to count that in, right? And I think that that's really a huge opportunity also for PMs, because now what we tend to do is that what I see many teams do is they will offload this issue of the mistakes to the engineers, right? So then the engineers will be optimizing the system to death, adding more data, changing the models, and so on. But you can never eliminate the mistakes completely in the real AI system, right? So I think that that's a huge opportunity for PMs to create impact, basically by understanding what are the mistakes, by communicating them clearly to users, and then also by having a roadmap to reduce them over time. Yeah. And that's it. Just for a quick summary, right? So the 4 points that we talked about today is anticipate your AI opportunity, so you can use the AI opportunity tree to structure the opportunity space, and then also to have a first prioritization. Then build and calibrate trust, because that's the basis for AI adoption, right? So by building transparency and also by managing errors in a very proactive and responsible way. Emphasize transparency, as said, by providing those partial AI explanations, and quantify and manage failure, as said. The last point, really big impact opportunity for PMs here. That's it. I will just switch in the book again. Now it actually gets a bit complicated, even more complicated than before. So if you go in this QR code, you will find, so that's a link to my newsletter. And if you subscribe today, then you will participate in the lottery, and we will raffle out 5 ebook copies among those people that subscribe today to the newsletter. Sorry, it needs to go via the newsletter, because we just need to make sure that we have all those emails so you can participate also. And in any case, so check it out. As said, it has a wide range of AI topics covered. If you have any specific questions about all of them, then of course also get in touch with me. Thank you very much.